I'm here down Astin-Gregory here at the Oxford low traffic neighbourhood protest. I've just taken a quick break and now making my way to resume the march. So today's event taking place at Oxford is standing against the low traffic neighbourhood scheme and the 15-minute city concept, which is sweeping its way around United Kingdom, but not just the United Kingdom, other parts of the world as well. The premise, as I shared in the previous video, as always, is a very positive one. The idea that you have everything that you need on your local doorstep within a 15-minute radius. The idea that you have, there's a few police here, look, lovely, on bikes. There's been quite a heavy police presence actually at the march. I'll see if I can get a sense of, I'm just at the back of the march now, having just taken a break. Ding, ding. Okay, thanks. The traffic is coming. The traffic's being let out, or is it? Irony, 15-minute city, maybe it won't be next time we come here. They said the traffic is coming. I said, well, give it a month, maybe it won't be. Yeah, the whole point of it, there's going to be restrictions on traffic in Oxford. So today the traffic might be on its way, tomorrow it might not be. So we're here today again to challenge the low traffic neighborhood schemes and the idea of 15-minute cities, which on the surface, as I said, all sounds like a wonderful ideal. Everything you need within a 15-minute radius of your doorstep, on foot, cycle, and who wouldn't want that? And if the city was actually taking time to invest in the city so that was possible, so that everything you needed was on your doorstep, you didn't actually need to travel, then that's a beautiful story. But of course, that's not actually the case. Rather than investing in local vicinity, you're going to see an investment in bollards, an investment in vehicle recognition cameras, and a whole man of other means of preventing you from traveling around the city, or limiting your access to certain parts of the city, or even potentially limiting your ability to travel to a number of frequencies per year. The reason why Oxford's become the epicenter of the conversation is because unlike other boroughs of London, for example, or other parts of the UK, the particular scheme here is more extreme. And of course, if you're going to challenge a concept like this, then you need to cap it whilst it's in its infancy. So whilst it is in its infancy, the reality is already these things are being rolled out in London. One of the London boroughs is potentially threatening to shut down 75% of its roads. How will businesses survive? And again, like there's a heavy police presence here, but the reality is, if there's a crime that takes place in one of these low traffic neighborhoods and there's bollards up, how are you going to get, how are they going to get through in these big vans? It's the practicalities of these things are always overlooked. And already there's photographs of ambulances getting stuck between flower beds and all these different restrictions that are kind of in the way. So, I kind of hear, and my head is spinning, because it's like, as I'm talking about what's being proposed, I think, what direction is the world going in? What's really happening here? I mean, every time I come on one of these protests and I comment on what's going on in the world, I'm thinking we're living in the upside down. If you haven't seen Stranger Things, where they literally live in the upside down. I mean, I think we really are living in the upside down. And it's our job to tilt it back up the right way. So, right, I've caught up with the march, as you can hear. That timing, by the way, was impeccable. And if I take a single clip from this video, I really hope you could hear of what was happening, because we've had problems with the sound. But the fact the police said the traffic's about to come, I'm like, yeah, today it is. So it's not tomorrow. It'll be blocked, restricted. Not any longer. So yeah, I'm really hopeful to speak to some of the locals about what they think about the low traffic neighborhood schemes. So far, having spoken to people off cam, most people don't really know the details of what's happening. I spoke to a bus driver, didn't really understand. And I said, well, you're going to be diverted halfway around the city. because the routes are going to be changing so significantly. And already, where they piloted this, there was a parent who told me their 15, 20-minute bus ride was taking an hour, 2 hours. Do not comply. So give it a chance. Gotta love a protest. It's always a lot of fun. Up until 2020, before the lockdown rallies, I'd never really been to a protest. But I can tell you something, they're liberating. It's like a festival. You get to stand for a cause, do something meaningful, get a good walk in. It's good for your health, it's good for your mind, and you meet lots of cool people. So if you haven't been to a protest before, just come along for the fun. You might learn a thing or two as well. So, and make some new friends. Protest is the new community, it seems, because your community is getting carved up into zones. Hey, buddy. All right, my man. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. Your community is getting carved up into zones. It's going to get chopped up by camera. You'll be paying a fine to enter one zone to the other. Again, in my tone of voice, there's almost this irony, but the reality is it's true. I've just moved from Bristol to Bournemouth, and in Bristol they've rolled out these virtual cameras. How you doing? The number plate recognition cameras, which is basically, yes, it's achieved its objective in terms of limiting the amount of people that travel into the city centre. So, but the hard reality is, we ended up traveling more because we'd have to go around the long way to get to the city. So we spend more time in the car, more miles, engine on for longer. Come on, common sense corner here. We're actually creating more pollution. You scale that out over a whole neighbourhood, and you've got a worse problem than you had before you started. Okay, you might be able to do some tests and say, wow, the pollution's gone down in the city centre. Well, maybe it has, but it's also now over the other side of the city. And there's more of it. Come on. And of course, whenever there's a global rollout of something like this, or a major rollout, you'll get the scientific institutions, which are all incentivized to support it, coming up with data and analysis that seemingly shows how wonderfully it's working. My pleasure. You got this data from the likes of King's, Imperial College, Oxford, of course. Here we are in Oxford. And all these different universities that are essentially pro-narrative because they're intrinsically linked with. And again, I have to be careful what I say because I'm not careful what I say, but when people hear this for the first time and they say, well, academic institutions are aligned with government initiatives. Yeah, they are. And they're also aligned with corporate interests. And, you've got to look at the funding sources and you've got to look at, the groups they belong to. And all of a sudden you see, of course, their results are in favour. Academic impartiality doesn't exist anymore. It really doesn't. Academic is political. If you don't realise that, I mean, again, look, I went to university. I left in 2005. At the time, I was young and naive. There was political activity. There was the anti-war rallies during that time, but I never really looked back to think about like the political leaning or the politicization of my university experience. But now looking back, I can see it. I can see it. But it's got way worse. It's got way worse. So, yeah, of course, the data will probably come out in support of these initiatives, as they did with other things during lockdowns and the pandemic. And of course, later on, 2-3 years down the line, there's the course correction saying, oh, actually, well, they're not admitting they're wrong. But there's plenty of data that comes out, and there has been all since the beginning, really, like there is all these things. But the mainstream narrative starts to crumble. But again, like with the lockdowns and everything else, this is another restrictive practice that's in its infancy. But like we saw in lockdowns and other measures, they scale very, very quickly. And somehow, by weaponizing fear, by propaganda, somehow they get public support. Now, the same problems, the same social and cultural issues that led to such widespread support for lockdowns and other interventions are still here. So expecting the public to suddenly see the world differently is futile. Now, granted, this protest is way bigger than it would have been. Say this protest, say the pandemic hadn't occurred and the lockdowns hadn't occurred. There would be far from the streets here today, I can tell you that. there's a groundswell of people now who see the bigger picture. They can see what's happening. They can see the agendas. They can see factories. They can see the same actors, the same institutions, the same organizations, the same individuals at the heart of all these things. Because really at the heart of all of this is centralization of power and control, and the influence of that centralized control mechanism and structure has over politics, over governance. And that's why we're facing these kind of problems, not on an individualized scale. This isn't limited to Oxford. We're seeing it in London, Birmingham, all parts of the UK, all parts of the global economy. They're in all across Europe. And again, when people say that, they say, "Oh, is it a global conspiracy?" Well, no, but there's all these central organizations that are at the heart of it, and they gain agreement. And then, of course, they own the media, and the whole compliance machine switches on, and before long, Elevate Media, my brand. Yeah, my brand. Nice. So before long, these things are in motion, and not only in motion, but accelerating. So there you have it. Sorry to paint such a bleak story for you, but that's why we're here. And the good news is there's a much greater resistance, as I stated, than there would have been without the pandemic. The good thing about the pandemic is it's made at least some people see beyond what their TV screens tell them, and they've started to see the mechanisms of how the world works. And that's why people use terms like awake. It's about having your eyes open, rather than walking with your eyes closed into how the world works. It's an awakening in this sense to the mechanism of the global machine and how it operates. And if you don't have to spend much time scrutinizing the way that the last 2 years have gone, 3 years have gone, to understand that hasn't just dissipated in the wake of COVID. It's actually galvanized power, and initiatives like this are all part of the same machinery and same mentality, because this kind of authoritarian undertone of micromanaging people's lives through control mechanisms is the order of the day. You have to ask yourself, is that the future you want? I'm a new father. I've got a 17-month-old son, and I will do everything in my personal power to ensure that he grows up in a world that is free, where he's free to say what he wants to say, where he is free to move where he wants to move, and where he's able to make his own choices free of government intervention. So, there's a multitude of reasons why people attend these things. Personally, I'm here obviously to show what's going on and tell the story so that people understand the nature of these problems. But I'm personally here to take a stand as well. This is not how a free world operates. And people make the argument that, freedom comes with a price, and they're right. Freedom does come with a price, but it's not the kind of price that people present. Freedom comes with responsibility. And actually, what you'll find when you speak to people at rallies like this is you'll find that they live with great personality. They take great care over their own lives and their own communities. And actually, of all the people in the world, they're the ones actively out there making a difference, rather than the kind of keyboard warriors who are quite happy to dismiss people as conspiracy theorists or anti-vaxxers or far right, whatever the insult of the day is, So yeah, it's just a fascinating time to be alive. I actually think things like this are just going to become a catalyst for a much broader shift in the way society operates, because these types of mechanisms are growing at scale, but as is the resistance. And in the same way that lockdowns were kind of lockstep around the world, people aren't seeing the connection yet, but the rollout of these hoods, all controlled by surveillance systems and various other mechanisms, are happening simultaneously across the UK and around the world. It's not limited to Oxford. Oxford's an important city here because of the nature in which they're rolling it out and the speed at which they're rolling out and the mechanisms they're using. And there's a real sentiment as if it can be stopped here in Oxford, then it will galvanize momentum to actually stop the rollout in other areas. And, there have been some areas that have said no. Southend have said no. Cornwall has no. I mean, my wife is from Cornwall. We visit a lot. Nothing will happen if you can't move within 15 minutes of your home. No one will go anywhere. But that's the prospect of what we're facing here, So it's ask yourself, do you want to spend the rest of your life within a 15-minute radius of your home? And again, you'll have to, let's be real here. I'm not being a fundamentalist. You will be able to travel at present, but you'll pay the price. You'll pay a fine, or you'll have hey, how you doing? Or you have a number of passes to travel X amount of times per year. Is that what you want? Yeah, I know the counter argument is this. I don't want to live in a polluted world either. Well, no, neither do I. But do it. Clamping down on citizens' rights and freedoms is not the way to achieve it. It's about investing in cleaner energy. It's about greater innovation and just being creative in how we navigate the future. But it should never come at the expense of a free and open society. Well, that's the hard reality of the leadership of the world right now. They say that good times build weak leaders and hard times build strong leaders, and we can see that. We've been through a period of prosperity, and now we're facing weak leadership. And weak leadership, in order to feel powerful, take actions that give the perception of having greater control. It's in many ways it's as simple as that. There's power dynamics at play, but we're in a recessionary period now, and as always, recessionary periods like this build stronger leadership. So we could expect to see a shift in political leadership over the years ahead. But right now, the problems we're facing today require public intervention, because our leaders aren't going to take a stand, although some will, for certain. We saw the resistance through certain political leaders during the COVID story, but here, it's early stage, and because there's so little attention on the issue, even political leaders are behind the curve. So we've got to get ahead of the curve here. We've got to be talking about what's happening, and we got to avoid we've got to avoid falling for the simple emotive storylines that come out. Sadiq Khan was on the radio the other day saying it's all about protecting the children's lungs, and who doesn't want to protect their children? But this protectionism is always the argument that's used in order to enforce these types of policies. It's an emotive storyline that is designed to capture your attention, and there can be reasonable intent. Of course, you can argue that, but the means are entirely questionable, and that's putting it lightly. So, whenever I talk to people about what the nature of these mechanisms are, the low traffic schemes and the 15-minute cities, they can't get their head around that that's actually what's happening until they recognize they can't get out of their driveway because there's a bollard in the way. Quite literally, there's now people waking up and finding they have to drive 20 minutes around the houses to get to their home. And supposedly that's going to reduce pollution by traveling further. It's spending more time in the car. So again, we live in a time where there's a great utopianism and idealism, and that, we need creativity and we need forward thinking, but that has to be coupled with pragmatism and understanding the practical reality. I'm about to walk, there's a big police van in front of me in a minute. If there was a crime, an emergency, which required intervention, where a van of that nature was called on site, but they have to drive 20 minutes around. I mean, we know that in the healthcare system, the ambulance response times are hideous. You start putting bollards up all around the city, you're going to multiply the waiting times. If this police car needs to get to somewhere in a hurry right now, we're going to find it hard because it's parked up amongst the protests. But it's going to find it even harder when there's bollards everywhere. And of course, they'll probably be exempt from, the CCTV eyes in the sky. But the reality is this, it's not just cameras that are being used. It's bollards and blockades and all kinds of things. And they're already here. So, just if you go online, and you don't have to trust anything I say, just go online and type in low traffic neighbourhood, type in 15-minute cities, UK, and you'll see in Haringey, multiple boroughs in London, but there's a huge resistance here. There's a huge resistance, not only to the idea of low traffic neighborhoods, but people are just fed up of governments and local councils making decisions that they do not consent to. The reality is, when you look at the consultations that have been rolled out for all of these schemes, there's been an overwhelming rejection of these schemes. Here in Oxford, there's been a huge rejection. In London, massive rejection. And we're not talking small numbers. We're talking, major citizen groups, community groups coming together to reject these proposals, yet they're still going ahead. So that's why you'll see the Take Back Democracy signs here in Oxford, the Together group put out.